do the things you say you want to do, or be happy with where you're at. Because I think a lot of people, they like this ideal of a certain where they want to be. So it's making sure you know exactly where you want to be and what you want.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that I'm very value driven.
Hmm.
So I'm going to, if you know, and I spoke about this with Adrian earlier, Adrian Allen, for those
Mm.
listening. I had a Coach's Corner episode with him earlier today, and we spoke about the same thing. It's like you need to understand what your values are so
Hmm.
that you can live in line with them. Because if you don't understand what those values are, then you're just kind of floating through making decisions on the fly. However, if you do know what your values are, then every decision you make is in line with that, because if you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to many others,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So, when you understand what your values are, then it's much easier to live in line with them and make decisions that are going to tie into those things.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
and it's one of those things that people are afraid of change, and that's probably because a lot of people haven't really experienced that much change in their life, or if they have experienced change, like big change, it's normally something massive. It's normally like a death in the family or
And yeah,
something like
negative, a
that.
negative that
Yeah,
sets the fear.
yeah, exactly. It's normally a negative change. So I can speak from my experience. I've made multiple massive decisions in my life where I've hit those crossroads and I'm like, where do I want to go now? What do I want to achieve? And, I haven't always been clear on what my values were, or even what the fuck I was doing with my life, right? I'm still figuring this shit out as I go. Definitely don't have all the answers, but there's been multiple times in my life where I've hit those crossroads and I've had to make a big decision.
Yeah.
I left home when I was 14 years old. I came from an abusive family. I don't know my father. My stepdad was a fucking asshole. I left home to get away from that environment. And I didn't know where the fuck I was going. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I didn't want to be there. And that was a massive decision for a 14-year-old kid, to leave
I
school,
know.
to leave home, to leave the state that I grew up in, to move to like halfway across the other side of the country to start working. Massive decision,
And
and then I
how
made
do
another massive.
you, yeah,
Sorry,
sorry.
go on.
I was say, and from that, like just from that experience, because that's a massive, massive deal and a massive like history from your childhood. How do you remain so level-headed now? Like, how have you built that up over the years? Like, like you always see there's a from people with such backgrounds. Sometimes they're not always on the road on a positive road, or you might find they might be in drugs or they go a completely different route. How, just putting the questions on you, how have you
No, it's good.
remained and with that kind of that attitude to create the life that you have now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, back then I didn't really know what my values were. I didn't know what was driving me, but I knew that if I stayed where I was, that was not going to serve me. I was going to end up in jail or something. I was surrounded by drugs and alcohol, and, I was stealing shit, and I was hanging out with bad people, and I was skipping school and things like that. And like I said, my stepdad was abusive, used to beat my mum and myself. And I just knew that I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be in that environment because, you know, that was my father figure. That was my role model. And I knew that if I stayed there, then I would probably follow in his footsteps, and that environment was going to shape me. So I knew that, I staying there was more scary for me than fucking leaving and walking out into the big wide open world with no answers.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what drove me, was to get away from there. And I've spoken about motivation direction in one of my very early podcasts. Sometimes we're moving towards something, sometimes we're moving away from something, and one's not necessarily better than the other, but there's going to be different times when you apply those different tools. So I ended up moving to Darwin, working up there,
At
and
14.
then at 14, yeah.
I have listened to this podcast, but yeah, how the hell do you manage that?
um, I don't know. I just knew that where I was not where I wanted to be,
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I can to, get away from there. And I was working at a building supplies company that was, supplying cement and Rio bars and that type of stuff for like raw materials for building sites. And it was fucking backbreaking work, but it was better than where I was.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah, it's
making
awesome.
money, and I was out on my own. And like, I came from a poor family, so I never had any money or anything like that. And I was like, sweet, I'm making money, and I can buy whatever I want whenever I want, and
Yeah.
I'm away from that environment, and I'm creating my own life. And I still fucking smoked weed and got on the piss and shit like that when I was 14, 15, 16 years old. But then I started playing rugby and kind of got in with that crew, and then ended up moving down to Sydney. So, again, another one of those big decisions was I wanted to join the army, and then I got picked up playing rugby. I went through the different rep teams and things like that, and got offered a scholarship down to Sydney. 17 years old, didn't really know what I was doing with my life. I'm just going to go down there, and just went down there, had a crack, like took my bags down there and rocked up at one of my mates' places on his doorstep. And I was like, hey man, can I stay here for a bit?
Yeah, yeah.
So that was scary. And then I went back to Darwin. I joined the army, deployed 3 times in 6 years, got out of the army, like packed up everything in my house, sold everything off, and like moved down to Tasmania with a girl that I'd met, a month earlier. And I was like, my mates are like, what the fuck are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, there's an opportunity that I'm going to chase after. Where I'm at right now, I'm not, it's not that I'm not happy where I am, but an opportunity's come up, and I'm going to go and explore that. And I'm going to, follow that and see where that road goes. And, 5 years later, we traveled the world, went to 40 different countries together. And then had that conversation. I was like, you know what, where you're at right now, where I'm at right now, it's not where we thought we'd see each other
Hmm.
together 5 years ago when we first got together. So, we hit that crossroads again and went our separate ways. And I came to Thailand, and I've been here since. So, I've had those massive moments in my life multiple times. And,
Hmm.
again, you need to take that leap. You need to
Yeah.
trust in yourself. You need to trust in your ability to just fucking figure shit out. And I think this is what's missing from a lot of people is they just expect things to fall in their lap, and they expect things to be easy. One of my favorite quotes is, people that make hard decisions live an easy life, but people that
Yeah.
make easy decisions live a hard life.